often do you make it back to Prince Albert?
Actually, I went back this past summer for the first time in quite a while. My parents live in Saskatoon. And
Okay.
so I went back to visit them this summer, and then I went back for a week here just to get my mom and dad settled in. My mom had some surgery done, so I had to be there to take care of my dad a bit. So a couple of trips back home.
I was doing the math, and if I'm accurate, when you were about 13, the Prince Albert Raiders make the move to the Western Hockey League and then go on this improbable 3-year run where in 1985 they win the Memorial Cup. I could imagine that, being in kind of your formative years and an aspiring hockey player, how impactful that must have been. What do you remember about that time?
Oh, it was a special time, for the Raiders to go from Tier 2 into Major Junior and to win the cup after being in the league 3 years was pretty remarkable, and just be a part of that. Prince Albert's not a very big town, and so the building was packed to the rafters, and they had a really good hockey team that year, obviously, and the city was buzzing for sure.
I bet. I bet. Coaching's changed a lot since that time, but I wonder what a part of, maybe your DNA as a coach today is. Can you trace back to, maybe some of the coaches you had during that stage of your career?
Well, in junior, I had three different junior coaches. I had Peter Anholt, Rick Wilson, and Terry Simpson, and
Oh, wow.
all were a bit different. Terry came back from the National Hockey League with my 20-year-old year, and we had a pretty good team. We lost to Lethbridge in Game 7. They went on to play Kamloops. I think Kamloops beat them, but you know, every coach is different. One thing that was consistent is that all three coaches really leaned on you hard, and I guess what I'm trying to say is that if things did not go well in the games, there were some spirited skates. You hear about the skates when you're coming back from Calgary when we uh, we lost to Medicine Hat on a Saturday, lost to Calgary on Sunday. We got back home to Prince Albert about 6:45, and it was about 40 below out. And Rick Wilson comes in and he goes, "Don't start your cars. Be on the ice in 15 minutes." And back then, it wasn't like today where guys have three sets of underwear. So the stuff that we wore in the game was frozen, and so
Oh,
we had to find some undergear, and we worked on our stride for about an hour and a half.
well, hopefully the smarty seats were cheering you on.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, we first started skating. The lights were off in the building. They didn't get turned on until about 7:30. So we're skating in the dark.
No kidding. No
Yeah.
kidding. You're obviously coming off back-to-back Calder Cup championships. Just the nature of the league that you're in. I'm sure there's a lot of new faces on your roster. How do you turn the page and write a new chapter this year?
You know what? It's been tough this year. Even though we're having a pretty good year, and we've had 18 to 20 players return from last year's roster, we added a few key players to complement them. It's uh, it's one of those things where last year at this time I thought we were going to suffer the Calder Cup hangover, but that wasn't the case. We're kind of going through it a bit of it this year, and we're not like when we play hockey teams, we're not surprising anybody. Like they know the Hershey Bears are coming to town, so we get everybody's A game. So it's been a battle this year just to keep the guys motivated because when you play in those meaningful games in overtime, 2 years ago, Game 7 in the finals, we won, and then won in Game 6 last year against the same hockey team, Coachella. Um, when you play these games, like maybe in November, we're going to Lehigh Valley and the buildings aren't packed. It's hard for the guys to get up for the games, and so that's a challenge that we have as a coaching staff here is just trying to keep the guys motivated, keep things fresh, and you know we've been playing all right, but I don't think we're at a point where we should be yet. We still have some time before playoffs to fine tune how we play. We're still trying to figure out some of the new players that we have, what makes them tick. But we keep on plugging away here, and we just got to keep it going.
I mean, you guys are having, in the standings at least, you guys are definitely in the mix. Aside from the wins and losses, what might be some of the things that you pay attention to specific to this time of year, whether it's, certain analytics or maybe just with, your own eyeballs that sort of give you a pulse on your team?
Well, we're pretty banged up front right now, and so we lack some scoring. We have some key players that provide offense for us that are hurt, and I think the biggest thing for us as a coaching staff is that we want to pay attention to the details and execution. Sometimes our guys will just go out there and they think the game's going to be easy, but what they have to understand is that everybody's gunning for us, and there's no easy nights in this league, and especially like our division's pretty tough. But I think just the execution and the details of the game, don't let those things slide, because when you do, it's hard to get them back. And we just got to make sure that the guys understand what it takes to win. A lot of guys do, but you know, I just felt not as of late, but maybe about a month ago, there was a lot of complacency. We won two championships, um, and I think the guys were maybe feeling a bit full of themselves.
Yeah.
So, we got spanked by Bridgeport 6-1, and it was kind of a wake up call for our team. And you know what, those things do happen, but like it was a wake up call for our team. And I think that we have to understand that it's going to be difficult. It's always hard to win, but like our goal this year is to win another Calder Cup, and so the guys all know that. They know when they walk into the dressing room that that's the intention of the organization, and also develop players for Washington, right? So it's going to be a battle right to the end. We're sitting in a pretty good spot right now. Like I said, we played a lot of hockey. This week's a pretty light week, so I can give some time off. But we have to keep the pedal down, and we just want to make sure we're playing good 60-minute hockey every night.
So, you talk about, it's a bit of a light week. I think you guys played on Saturday night. You don't play again until Friday. Obviously, the nature of the American Hockey League is that it is predominantly a weekend league. What is your practice, your schedule look like just from a staff perspective and the workflow? Do you guys go into it and say that we've got specific days where, it's a power play day or a skill day? Or might you say, hey, like if scoring, for example, is something that you're trying to address, that, hey, this week, like every practice, we're going to be focusing on some of those details that we believe are important to us when it comes to scoring goals?
Yeah, you know what? You mentioned it's pretty much a weekend league, but for our team this year, we played a lot of like a lot of Wednesday games.
Okay.
Had a very similar, like it's been a weird schedule for me because it's the first time where we've played this many games before Christmas. Usually,
Yeah.
you look at January, February, March. That's where they put a lot of games in when football's finished, right?
Of
But
course. Yeah.
but it's been busy for us. So like this week was quite simple. After the game on Saturday, I said we have to recharge our batteries, and I gave them 2 days off, and then I said be prepared for practice on Tuesday because it's going to be a work day. And when I mean work day, it's going to be a tough grind. But we played so much, and guys are banged up. I'm going to give them the day off again tomorrow because then I'll have two practices to prepare for the weekend, and that's where we'll start looking at a lot of the system work. We'll probably work in the power play and penalty kill the day before the game. So I keep in contact with, I always talk with our strength and conditioning coach, and he has a pretty good pulse of the players, of how they're feeling, if they're run down. They wear heart monitors every practice so we can see what the workload's like. And so I consult with him quite a bit. I'm going to say, hey, today this is what I'm thinking. And he goes, that'd be perfect. Or he says, you know what, the guys are really tired, so this maybe not work them as hard. So we have a pretty good pulse of that. So at the start of the year, we try to map out our template for the whole season. But once
Yeah.
you get into it, it's hard to predict how how fatigued the guys are, if they're sick or not. So those are the things that we have to adjust and pull an audible and maybe do something a bit different than we had planned. But we consult as a staff about what we wanted to accomplish. We do a lot of the same drills for preparation, so the guys know them, so we don't spend a lot of time at the board. So we can get get the guys with the quality work, and we can get in practice, have good quality, and get out of here and enjoy the rest of the day.
Well, I want to ask you about, two questions. And that's, really insightful. When it comes to talking to your strength coach, you know, I- I'm going to guess that back when you were a player in Prince Albert, if the coach had have asked you guys, do you want to work on your stride at 7 a.m. when you get off the bus? The answer probably would have been no. And I'm sure that if you ask your players today, do you want a hard day coming off the weekend, that that you might not get everybody's hand up, but how do you, I guess, balance taking players' feedback, taking your strength coach's feedback, just based on from a recovery standpoint? I think we just we know how important that is now, and that
Yeah.
ultimately it leads to better performance in game. But how do you balance all that with also just your own sort of coaching intuition to say, hey, I think we kind of need a hard day? How do you map that out in your season?
Well, you know what? Like from doing this for a lot of years and playing for 12 years, it's one of those things where I just did it by feel before the science came
Yeah.
to our hockey team. But now, like it was interesting. The last couple of years, I mapped out my practice week, and like I don't like practicing 4 days in a row. The max is three.
Okay.
It's just
Interesting.
because guys get stale,
Yeah.
and then you come out flat in the game. And so, but the science actually matches how I feel, like how we should work the guys, and that's a conversation we have. Besides the strength coach, we talk with my staff, Nick Boulin and Patrick Weller, and we go over it because they all played, and so we were kind of using it by feel. But what we found out with the science of it, with the heart rate monitors and stuff, and their workload, we were pretty darn close to doing what we should do. Because sometimes with feel before the science came, like you come out flat on a Friday night and you're thinking to yourself, well, I didn't prepare the guys the right way because they're flat. And so, like, there's a lot of science that goes into the game now where, if you have practice over the course of the week, you know, the strength guy will come in and he goes, well, we can have a hard day here, but then ease them off here. And then before the game, the practice before the start playing games, you got to wrap them back up so they get into game mode. And
Yeah.
so it's pretty interesting actually. And, you know, everybody's doing it now, and it's so competitive. And if you have just the slightest edge, that's all it takes sometimes to win, right?
No, absolutely. Um, you also mention the benefit of sticking with drills that the players know, and I worry sometimes. I mean, I just look at our site. If you go on there today, you could there's literally thousands of drills, and I think sometimes it's easy for a coach to get sucked in and say, I gotta create something from scratch every single practice or every single time I get in front of my team. But I think that what you say is just really sound advice, and that there's a benefit to having some familiarity with the players, that they can jump into it, they can get their reps in, and that I would think in some cases it also allows you to maybe work on some different details within the drill, or you can maybe have a different spin or angle on each drill. I'd just be curious, can you maybe just elaborate how you think about practice planning?
Well, like we like to do drills that always have a purpose.
Yeah.
There's no fluff drills like the shooting drills, for instance. We do this drill. It's called exit entries. It's a 2-0 drill where you kick it to the outside lane. Two guys are going. We want a shot for the far pad and have guys driving the net, try to
Yeah.
manufacture goals that way. But one thing, like just from my experience working with, in the National League with Rick Bonus, Jim Montgomery, and that, when you start looking at line rushes, you know, um, some coaches just want to say like a middle lane drive, right? But what we found out is that if you come towards the dot and you kick it to the outside lane, especially in a 3-on-2, just isolating that one defenseman, that weak side defenseman that's defending you, he has to make a choice to come over and take the guy on the strong side dot, or make the choice for the far dot. And some teams get organized really quick off the rush. Colorado's a team, the Avalanche. They get organized really quick, and they have a dot line driver. So that's just a shooting drill, okay, for the goalies and that. But also we're working on our system where off the rushes we want to make sure we have good support in the dot line. And so that's just one example. It's a shooting drill. But as for the practice plan, we'll look at we'll break down our video from the games and where we're having trouble, and then we'll design drills within our template of drills, and like we might tweak it a bit to serve the purpose that we want to teach and get better
Yeah.
at. So, and like the players are creatures of, you know, creatures of habit. Like where
For sure.
they, you throw something new at them, and all of a sudden they get, holy cow! Like sometimes it's good to freshen up the drills,
Yeah.
but they all know the drills we've done here, and like we have quite a few, but they all serve a purpose, and the guys get comfortable doing them. some players might not like a particular drill. Like we did the Boston Battle today, we had some compete where it's a 2-on-2 down low on each end of the ice, and I blow the whistle after about 20 seconds of battling, and they have to switch ends and battle on the other end. So I'm sure that's not a popular drill, but we wanted to get the compete up in practice today. So everything's done with a purpose. Otherwise, if you start doing some fluff drills like the horseshoe or whatever it is, it doesn't really serve a purpose. So that's why we try to maximize our time with the players so we can teach along the way.
For sure. And so you mentioned some of those offensive details. When I look back at your resume, whether it's in Hershey, even going back to your time in Grand Rapids, your teams have consistently been very stingy defensively. If I were to go back and poll all your players and say, like, what's the one defensive detail that Coach Nelson is barking at us about in practice, what might that be?
Well, stick on puck when you check somebody. Make sure you're staying on the D side. Those are the two most important things. We talk about forwards closing quick on the opposing team's defenders. If it goes low to high, make sure that you have your shot in the body, like your body in the shot lane. But the biggest thing is how we check. We take care of our own net first. I learned a lot from my time in Dallas. That's the way we played in Dallas with Monty and Rick Bowness, and it really has served us pretty well. Plus, we have the personnel. Like we have two quality goaltenders that bail us out when things break down. But we want to make sure that we make teams earn their wins against us, and make sure, like for instance, like you're in the offensive zone, all of a sudden the puck gets turned over. We have a rule: if you're not attacking, you're returning. So we want to make sure our reloads are real strong, so we can not give up any odd man rushes. And last year's team was really good defensively. Like I think there was 8 or 10 games where we never allowed an odd man rush against, which is pretty much unheard of. This year's team, um, especially at the start of the year, we're giving up too many odd mans and the pucks are ending up in the back for our net. We just feel that if you play good defense, the offense will take care of itself, and it's worked for us so far.
If I were to go watch, say press conferences during training camp in the National Hockey League, or even in and around the draft and development camps, you'll hear coaches and GMs say, you know, prospect has a ton of talent. They got to learn to play away from the puck, and that sort of play away from the puck, at least from an outsider's perspective, would seem to be, probably that biggest barrier to entry for a player into the National Hockey League, at least to play there consistently. How do you help players develop that skill at your level? Is that on the ice? Is that through video? Is it a combination?
It's a combination. Like we'll go through drills, like I said, and we'll work in those areas, but also video. Um, my two assistants do a great job pulling guys in, watching video. It's 5-on-5 shifts or any kind of special teams, and the guys learn. The player of today don't mind watching video because it
Yeah.
wasn't back like when I played. Because when we showed video when I played, it was a bashing session. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
coaches are
Totally.
calling
Yeah.
you out. So it's more of a teaching tool for us. You know
Yeah.
what? And also to give the players some confidence, knowing like they aren't all bad clips. Like sometimes like there's clips where we show guy, hey, this is why we work on this. You're starting to get it, and good job, keep it up. But I feel for the guys to make the jump from the American League to the National Hockey League, you do have to play well away from the puck, because that gives the coach confidence in the National Hockey League to put you out in key situations.
Yeah.
And but it has to be consistent. That's the biggest thing in the American League. You want to make sure the players understand in order to play in the National League, you have to have the consistent effort day in, day out. And that's what you try to teach the young guys. They just can't take a night off. And so, like, just simple things like wall work. Teams that are forechecking now in the ozone, they're slamming their defensemen down walls. You're going to have confrontation there. So you have to make sure that you do a good job of getting the puck out or make a play to get the puck out of the zone, because those things will cost you, especially 10 feet inside your own blue line. So those are just little areas that we really try to
Yeah.
focus on, and it goes with our team concept as well.
I look at your roster in Hershey, and I'm sure you're aware of this. It's just funny, like just in general conversation with hockey, like you guys have definitely become the villains of the American Hockey League.
The Evil Empire. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So, which is kind of a bit of a badge of honor, I'm sure. But um, you know, I, I look at your team, and there's a lot of quality veterans in your locker room, and I know that in some cases the theory might be, well, in the American League it should be, um, you want just a bunch of young players so they kind of learn on the fly. And I've got some pals that coach in your league, and that comes with its own set of challenges. Is there a benefit, and this would go, I guess, to coaches of all levels, to having, as much as you're preaching the message, but when you talk about consistency, for example, and having a consistent effort day to day, is one of the best ways to teach that as a coach, to be able to point in the locker room and say, look at, your captain or a veteran player that's been around, and say, just do it like they do it.
Yeah, you're exactly right, and that's our organizational philosophy. We
Yeah,
want our prospects to come into an environment where we have a chance to win, because I think winning is a form of development. I really truly do.
absolutely. Yeah,
And so we bring in, like we'll sign quality veterans to NHL deals, but also bring in some just American League deals for players that can help the team win. But besides just coming to practice and being on the ice and watching the veteran players play, it's also off the ice on the road. How you conduct yourself as a professional.
yeah, yeah,
Just a simple thing, going out for dinner, just having some of these older guys that have been around, and it's something so simple. It could be like a young kid. We've had plenty of players over the years where they didn't know how to pay bills and stuff like that. So it's a part of growing up, because when these junior kids come to us, they had billets their whole life, and their parents took care of them, and now they're on their own. And but having a veteran presence certainly does help. Now, there's different philosophies with other organizations where they just want the young guys playing, and baptism by fire. And but we have a philosophy that, as an organization, we want our teams to play deep into the playoffs, so they get that experience of playing in those very important games. And we saw it the last couple of years, that the growth that I saw from Hendricks Lapierre, um, Connor McMichael, Alexei Protas, the growth that I saw. They went on that run with us. We weren't the favorites to win the championship that year. Coachella is a very strong hockey team, and we were down in the series, and how we persevered. And the first two games in Coachella, we got beat 4-0 and 5-0, never scored a
I was
goal
going to
in
ask you about
Coachella.
that. Yeah, yeah,
And then we had a 3-game stint here at home, and every game was really tight. We won two in overtime, and the other the other game was a 3-2 win, and they're surging. So had one more win to get the championship, and we lost 5-2 in Game 6. So we were kind of behind the eight ball. Like we finally scored, you know, a few goals in that building. Tough building to play in,
yep.
but going through that experience and seeing how the guys pushed through, and for us to win Game 7 in overtime was an unbelievable experience. But the growth that I saw from those players that I mentioned, and even the players that came back to me, was exceptional, because they went through those important games, and they came to training camp the next year, and they were flying. And so I think that's what we think as an organization, to play those really important games, which will advance their career.
Well, you know what? I think it's just so interesting. You talk about not having high expectations. Like, I don't think anybody picked the Washington Capitals to be in the position they're in. But then when you go down the roster and you look at some of the contributors they have, especially the young players, I mean, all these kids have done is win hockey games the last 2 years, and play in big games. So again, I think your point is duly noted, that development can be measured in a lot of different ways, but being a part of big games and winning those games is invaluable. You mentioned in 2023, you guys go to the Calder Cup final. You lose the first two games. You're outscored 9-rip. Um, just looking at, when you talk about like what your team's going through now, where you're maybe, you feel like you got to make some adjustments. Just looking back in 2023, as a coach, how do you guard, I guess, against making wholesale changes? Maybe it's structurally or tactically, versus maybe finding like what's that dial we can turn a few degrees to maybe get our team back on track and playing to their strengths.
Well, you know what? Even though we have a lot of returning players, it seems like every team is different every year. You know what I'm
Totally.
saying?
Yeah.
Like you add a few players to it, so it has a different flavor when you're on the ice. Like we don't. Dylan McElrath made the Caps this year, so that was our captain the last couple of years. So he was a guy that was a big hole for us to fill, like with his grit and his leadership. So that was a big change for our hockey team right there. And so we made Aaron Ness our captain, and he's been around. He's been a captain before, but we still have a really good nucleus of character and leadership in the dressing room, which is fine. So I think from a coaching staff, we just got to see what fits and what works best for our hockey team. The 2023 team, we were more or less a forechecking team. We wanted to play similar style as Carolina. Really be an aggressive forechecking team. Last year's team did not want to forecheck. We had the same system and everything, but we were more of a rush team, and our team this year is more of a rush team as well. So it's you add a few different players that bring different intangibles to your team, and you kind of have to tweak with them. And we haven't changed a whole lot here, but we're adding things to our system that we feel it's going to benefit the group that we have in our dressing room right now. And so it's by feel, going through video, look at analytics. You know, analytics is a very good tool, but you have to have an eye test as well. I think you take
Yeah.
a bit of both. So we try to keep our fingers and all that. We look at Pro Logic after after we play a game to see how much ozone time we had, how much did they have, um, puck battle percentage, all that stuff kind of indicates where your team's at. And plus, with us watching the video over again, just seeing what we really need to work on. So, um, as a coach, you're always evolving, and we all learn off of each other. We have the coaches symposiums and chat rooms and stuff where you're always trying to, I guess, get the advantage. And you're always learning what works well, and somebody comes up with a great idea, and all of a sudden, you find your team playing that way, and I'll guarantee you, 31 teams that did not win the Stanley Cup last year studied Florida. I'll guarantee you that.
Yeah, I can
So
confirm that. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
so like there's constant studies going on with that, but you got to see what's right with your personnel.
Yeah,
Like you can't you can help them, be a very good forechecking team, but like we have the talent where we can score off the rush. So we're more of
yeah.
a rush team this year. It's totally different than it was 2 years ago. So we'll see what shakes out here, but we just have to keep our finger on it and see what works for this group.
If you could only look at one stat after every game, what would it be?
Scoring chances. I think scoring chances for and against. How are we giving up our chances against? For instance, if we give up like seven rush chances, well, we have to work on rush defense. If we're giving up chances where they have possession in our defensive zone and we're giving up chances like that, we have to really focus on that. So it kind of gives you a pretty good idea. And then when you get into the science of things, like the ones that we look at are, offensive zone possession time, and that's one of the stats we look at. But scoring chances, basically, like, are we generating more than the opposing team? And you try to do the scoring chances as fair as possible. So your standard
Yeah.
always has to be the same for both teams.
Hmm. Um, I would imagine that one of the challenges of coaching in the American Hockey League is that you're not, your players aren't just competing against players on the other team. Effectively they're competing against each other too for the next call up or opportunity to go up to, in your case, Washington. Yet what's really interesting is just, going back and looking at, interviews with your players, again, whether it's in Hershey, Grand Rapids, is that they consistently speak to the family type atmosphere that you've been able to create. And I think every coach aspires to do that. I think anybody that's coached for a long time knows how challenging that can be. What have you learned about bringing a group together over the course of your career?
Well, you know what? When I played for Barry Trotz, and we won a cup there in Portland, and I just really admired the way that he handled the group. Like he held us accountable. He was firm on us, but also like he believed in the family atmosphere, and I truly believe in that. That's what I try to create wherever I go. Um, that's why I have a pig roast at the start of the year. I cook a pig
No way.
for the players and the families. It's become tradition, and it's just
Amazing.
a chance for us to get away from the rink, and it shows the human side of shows the players the human side of us coaches, where we get together and have some fun and talk to each other's families, the wives and girlfriends. So people have to understand, like I have these guys for maybe 3.5 hours a day.
Yeah.
And so when they go home to their support staff, you want to make sure that they understand the sports staff, like the wives or girlfriends or whoever it is, that they feel part of this organization as well. And I think that's huge. And once you get that family type atmosphere, when I'm able to get the guys to play harder for the guy next to them than themselves, then you have them. And you got to be unselfish. But the thing is that we always try to create that family type atmosphere because nothing's stronger than a family. And you know, as you mentioned, like a lot of these guys are competing against them, each other to get the next call up. But the environment that we've had when guys get called up, the rest of the team are happy for that person, and you know, they they're just like us coaches when they watch him play in Washington. We're all cheering for him to do well. So um, it takes a combined effort. It's not just myself or it's the coaching staff. I have to make sure the coaching staff is all intact. Our trainers, our equipment managers, all that stuff. Like we're all one big family, and that's the way we treat it. And that's what we had engraved inside our rings the last couple of years is family. And that's what it's
No
about.
way.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah. And I think in any business, doesn't matter if it's just sports or whatever. I think if you're a manager or a CEO or whatever, that I think that creating that culture really will boost productivity, and that's what we feel here. Like the guys had a tough practice today, but the last group that was skating, all the rest of the guys that were done the skate, they were cheering the other guys on, and that's what we like to see. Like I want to make sure that the guys understand when they come to the rink, they want to come to the rink and work hard and get better. No, there's always tough days where you have to lean on
For
them,
sure. Yeah.
but we wanted an environment where the guys want to come to the rink and are happy to come here and work hard and make themselves better, and that's what we try to create here, and it's been working out for us so far.
Well, I want to go back to earlier in your career. So you retire right away. You get behind the bench in Grand Rapids as an assistant coach, and then the next year you move to Muskegon in the United Hockey League. You spent 3 years there, but the first 2 years you win a championship. So the first question would be: when you first became a head coach, if you had like a time machine and somebody could have come back and given you some advice, like what advice would you have wanted when you first made that jump to become a head coach?
I think the biggest thing is believe it in yourself.
Yeah.
Like at that level, you're by yourself. Like you don't have any assistants when I was there. Like you're the lone wolf, and it worked out pretty well because a lot of the guys that I coached there, I played with 2 years prior to that, and so I think just be yourself, and because you can't fake being somebody else, you can't. The players will see right through you, and apparently I have a style that that people like, and they like playing for me, and that some days, like I said, are tough days when you have to hold them accountable. Had plenty of discussions with that, and but I just like to have an open door policy where players have a problem, they come in and talk with me, and we work it out together because it shows that I care about them. And sometimes those conversations are tough if you have to lean on a player that, like, where you have to tell them, look, we need more out of you. You're not playing to your standard, and the generation of today, uh, they're really sensitive. Like they're
Yeah.
really sensitive where they get emotional if things aren't going their way. It's just the way they are, and so you have to make sure that you have these conversations with them. Like our coaching staff tries to go through the room and talk to everybody on an individual basis every day, and that's where we find out what's going on in their personal life. Like we're not snooping or anything, but we want to make sure if somebody loses a family member or girlfriend breaks up with them and they're not feeling pretty good about themselves, we have to know those things because sometimes you see that on the ice where they're not performing like they should. Well, there's outside forces that are creating that for the players. We want to make sure that we get nip it in the bud and make sure the player knows that we're all with them and we're behind them. And that's just the way we do things here. It's like you said, it's a family atmosphere.
Well, you know what? And I think every coach has their version of that. Like I just, when you're sharing these stories, I just think back like when I was coaching at UBC, and we'd get a lot of ex major junior players, like at the start of every season, like the biggest challenge we had is we had kids that had never done laundry before.
Yeah.
And they like, and wearing, getting clean clothes was like, that was, they were like figuring that out was a big step for them. And you just, and we had to get involved. And, which sounds so simple, but you just learn that those things have such a big impact. What's going on away from the rink has such a big impact on the rink. Todd, when you talk about having those conversations, and in a lot of cases, those are tough conversations. Like again, going back to Muskegon, like did that come naturally to you, or did you, did you learn that from any of your coaches in particular?
Well, I think as a coach, I think every coach takes bits and pieces from every coach that you had,
Yeah,
and you apply it to your own style. Um, but that was tough. But I was with a really good group in Muskegon. They wanted to win.
yeah,
Um, there was a lot of winners in that team. We won a championship together when I was a player, and they're really good. They knew that it was my first head coaching job, and that so they made it pretty easy on me. Now there was days where I was really upset with them and that, um, but they took me in right away, and that was the biggest fear when I got hired there. They go, "How you can hold these guys accountable when you just played with these guys? They're your teammates 2 years ago." And I said, "Well, as a player, like I was, I guess, co-captain that year, assistant coach, player assistant. I held them accountable then. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
And they held themselves accountable. They really did because they wanted to win. And so that was one of the biggest things. When I went to Muskegon, I was accepted. There was no jealousy or anything like that. And my style, I've been told that I have a gift. I just do it naturally with how I deal with people. So I've been very fortunate with that. And once again, I'm just trying to be myself. I'm not trying to be anybody else.
No, I think that's great advice. What You spent 2 years in Atlanta with the Thrashers.
Yeah.
Um, what did you learn from that experience? And partly asked, we just had Craig Custance on the podcast, who's writes for the Athletic, but he started out in hockey covering the Thrashers, and obviously has some great stories of that time. But what did you take away from there? Just maybe from a hockey fan perspective, but also from a coaching perspective.
Well, one thing I really noticed is how hard the league is. It doesn't matter who you play in the National Hockey League; it's a battle.
Yeah,
It's night in and night out, and we didn't make the playoffs both years I was there. The second year, I think we're
you
three.
guys were in the mix, though. You guys were in
Yeah,
the mix. You had a good
I,
team.
yeah, I think we're 3 points, below a playoff spot or something like that. But just the grind of how it is. It's everybody says, well, you get the charter everywhere. Well, still, it's a grind. Believe me, it's when you're playing back to back, and you have to get videos together and have your meetings with players and make sure they're really prepared. I think that was the biggest thing is how hard the league was. Because night in and night out, if you had an off night, you weren't going to win because it's just the way there was so much parity, and it's even worse now. You see it in the National Hockey League where it doesn't matter if it's a last place team playing against first place team. If you don't bring your game, you're not going to win. So I think it was a great experience for me. It was funny. Like I probably coached the youngest guy in the National Hockey, well, that I coached, Zach Bogosian. He's an 18-year-old, and
Oh
I
yeah,
also
he didn't
coached.
look like a little guy back then. He was,
No,
yeah,
he was a man child, that's for sure.
yeah, yeah.
But I also coached the oldest guy that I ever coached, and that was Chris Chelios when we called him up from
Oh
Chicago.
no way, that's right.
Yeah, Johnny Anderson walked over to me and he goes, look down in front of you. He goes, this will be the last time that you have a player that's older than you. So, but Chelly was great. He was awesome. Very low maintenance, and he was good for the younger guys as well.
What did he like? What did he want from the coaches? Do you think at that stage of his career?
No, like he was very, very coachable. He's one of those coachable guys I've
Yeah.
ever had. Yeah, and I think he was 47 or 49 at the time. And I remember this one time we're in Columbus, and he pinched in, and they chipped it by him for a 2-1. They scored, and he came off the ice, and I said, Chelly, he goes, don't pinch in, right? I said, yeah, I don't have to tell you that, like, in that situation. But he was awesome to work with. He was great. And also, like, I learned a lot from the players as well. Like, I was pretty young being an assistant coach at the time. I think it was like 38 or something like that. And it was just, it was was a fun time. You're coaching the National Hockey League and you working with all these players that make a lot of money, but I just over the years they're no different than anybody else. They're hockey players. They're going to make the same mistakes up there as they do in the American League.
Yeah.
And as a coach, you just got to stay on them.
Um, so from Atlanta, you go to Oklahoma City. The Barons at the time, the American League affiliate of the Edmonton Oilers, and in your second year, you have some success. And when you look back at that roster, you maybe don't have the most talented group, but you seem to have the right mix. What have you learned about, maybe your approach when you don't have the most talent on paper? How do you get the most out of those types of teams?
Well, you know what? That team that you mentioned, my second year there, that team was awesome. Like they were so detailed with our system work, and I could switch out certain breakouts if it's a set breakout, like mid game during the fly, and they'd pick it up like that. And it was just a great group. I think our leading scorer that year was Ryan Keller. He had 49 points only. I think the next closest was Mark Arcobello at 41. But if you look at that roster, it was really balanced. Like there's no real stud that stood out. It was four balanced lines, and they all produced. And that team was a very coachable team. Um, like I said, the reason why we won games that year, like people look at our roster, they go, "How you guys doing it?" But they played our system so well, and they were technically sound that we were tough to play against.
So you contrast that with the next year. It's an NHL lockout, and I remember this because I can remember going to watch you guys play in Abbotsford, where at the time it was the Flames affiliate.
Yeah,
The only sellout they had that year was when you guys came to town because you had Taylor Hall, Ryan Nugent Hopkins, Jordan Eberle, and
Justin.
Schultz
Yeah,
on defense. I think part of coaching and growing as a coach is sometimes you get thrown curveballs, but you learn a lot from curveballs. And I can imagine in that scenario, like on the surface, it might seem like, oh, this is great. We're getting all this injection of talent. But at the same time, there would be dynamics at play that would also present some challenges from a coaching perspective.
yeah. You know what? They came down, and I don't think those guys realized how hard the league was because besides them coming down, Houston had Charlie Coyle. They had Zucker there. Everybody had their stud players come down and play that first half of the season, and it was kind of like what we're going through now, where the guys from the NHL that came down didn't realize how hard it'd be because it was more scrambled hockey. It wasn't as neat as the NHL. Guys were caught out of position more in the American League, so they had to make an adjustment. And once they did, they were great, and they came down with a great attitude. But I always knew when, just based on their play, how the labor talks were going because if the labor talks were going well and they were getting close to getting a deal done, I didn't
Yeah,
I didn't get their best effort. And then if they're apart from the table and looks like their lockout was going to last a whole year, they played really well for me. So it's human nature; they wouldn't want to get hurt, right? But
yeah,
no, it was a fun time. It was fun watching those guys grow and that. And they're just like anybody else. But it's funny. I got a Taylor Hall story for you. I had Nugent Hopkins and Eberle and Taylor on a line together, and we're doing some D zone coverage, but also working on some O zone play. And the play was in one corner, and Taylor was standing on the dot on the other side. And I blew it down. I said, "Taylor, what are you doing?" I said, "You're watching the near side dot." He goes, "I'm hiding." I said, "Well, what do you mean you're hiding?" He goes, "Well, what's going to happen is that Nuge and Ebs are going to win the puck battle, and they're going to find me back door for a tap in."
yeah,
I go, "Well, you can do that up in Edmonton, but here in Oklahoma City, this is the way we're going to play here." And he
yeah,
goes, "Okay." Like he was good. Like they're all good. You know what? But that was a really weird year because we had those players, and then all of a sudden the dispute ended in January or something
yeah,
like that. And then we went like that year. Felt like I had three different teams. It was like had those NHLers for the first part, and then there was a transitionary team where we had to scramble and bring some guys in to fill our needs. And so that's when Jonathan Chichu came to us, and we finally got the team together that we wanted to. Phil Cornet was called up from Stockton just because he played in Oklahoma City the year before, but since the NHLers are there, we had to make room, right? So some guys were down in Stockton playing or Bakersfield, wherever. And so we got the team together, and then we really gelled together as a group, and we made it to. We lost in Game 7 to Grand Rapids that year in 2013 in the Western Conference Finals. And Grand Rapids went on to win. But that was a really interesting year. It was a tale of three teams for sure.
So, fast forward a couple years. It's December of 2014. It's your fifth year in Oklahoma City, and the Edmonton Oilers let Dallas Eakins go on December 15th, and you get called up. Can you just do you recall that phone call? I'm assuming it was a phone call, and when you get that news.
Yeah, I did because we were on a plane to Charlotte, and so we are switching planes in Chicago Midway, and all of a sudden my phone rang, and it was Scott Housen on the phone, and he says we made a move. We parted ways with Dallas, and he goes, "You want to come up and coach the team?" He goes, "That's if you want to." So of course I do. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
a chance. And a lot of people thought I was nuts, going into a situation because the team wasn't doing well, last place team. I'm coaching Oklahoma City. We're in first place, and all of a sudden I found myself on a plane to Phoenix from Charlotte because I had to go collect my bags in Charlotte when we landed and hopped on the plane to Phoenix. And that's where the team was at. And I remember that first meeting. I was at the rink with Craig McTavish, and it was about 7 o'clock in the morning, and we were talking, and all of a sudden we see the team come in about an hour and a half later, and I looked at the guys walking in, and they looked like they were beaten dogs, really depressed. Anytime you lose a coach like that, the players feel responsible, right? And so there's like a black cloud watching these guys walk in. I'm going, oh my goodness, what did I get myself into? But like I'm glad I made the decision to do that. You know, like when I went there, I tweaked a couple of things systematically, but more or less wanted them to come to the rink and make it a fun place to be. It's
yeah.
tough when you're a last place team in Edmonton and it's dark out when you get to the rink, and when the coaches leave, it's also dark. So I wanted to try to bring some life to the dressing room, and I thought we were able to do that. We weren't the most talented team by any stretch, but I think the people of Edmonton saw that the team was working hard and playing with some life, and you know, it wasn't as bad as it maybe felt before. But the players gave me what they had; they really did, and that's all I can ask.
I there's so many parallels when it comes to leadership, whether it's to business or other industries and coaching. But one of the things I think is so unique, and I've asked the same question, for example, to Jay Woodcroft when he was in the same position, where he's like, I get a call, and he's like, I basically have a plane ride from Bakersfield to Edmonton to get my ducks in a row. And I can only imagine, like, it's one of those situations. I try and put myself in Jay's shoes or your shoes, and I'm like, it must be the challenge of kind of getting your thoughts in order and having a plan and walking into a new dressing room is so unique. But what how did you get better from the second half, just from being a part of that team and leading them the second half of that season?
Well, you know what? Well, first off, it was kind of unique because Mac T wanted to look at the hockey team from behind the bench, right?
Yeah.
So if you remember the first 5 games, um, we were both in the bench, and I think that Mac T
Oh, I
just
didn't
wants us.
realize.
Yeah, he just wanted to
Yeah.
get a flavor of what's going on with the
Sure.
players. And then after the fifth game, I think we went 0-2-3 during that stretch. And after the fifth game, I talked to Mac T. I said, "Listen, Mac," I said, "I'm not going to fail you." I said, "Hand over the keys. There can only be one captain of the ship." The players are all looking back, like, who's the head coach? And so it was kind of a different situation. But once that happened, there was more clarity in the players' minds about who was running the show. And actually, it did help me transition too. You know what I'm saying? So like, you mentioned about thinking how you're going to change the team and do whatever. I remember that plane ride from Charlotte to Phoenix. I'm going like, what do I fix? Right? Just like what you're talking about. So I got to see the team with Mac there for the first couple weeks, and then finally when I said it's time to have me lead this team, and and from there, I just did my thing. I just coached, and you know, the things I did, I shortened up the practices a bit, but I had more intensity and tempo.
Yeah.
I tried not to go to the board too much. I pre-iced them with the drills, and just to get their tempo up. I remember my first practice when I was alone, or I wasn't alone. I was with the other assistants, but Mac wasn't there, and I decided to run a real high tempo practice. And after 20 minutes, guys were leaning on their sticks. I said, you know what? I said they should not be leaning on their sticks right now. I'm
Yeah.
going to go for another 25 minutes here. And so the practice was 45 minutes to 50 minutes, but it was really high intensity, and it really showed what we needed to work on. And so we focused on those areas, and we got better.
Yeah.
Um, I still had a losing record there. I think it was 17-22 and something, but at least the team played at a higher tempo during the games, and that kind of excited the fan base. Because Edmonton's a blue collar town, and they're proud of their sports teams there, but especially the Oilers, and just to watch the players, play with a higher tempo made for a bit more exciting hockey for them too, because we did two-man pressure all over the ice, which was different than what they were doing. So it got the guys on their toes, moving their feet, and we surprised a few teams.
It's so funny, man. Like I'm looking at your schedule. So you after that fifth game, you win your first game by the bench. You beat LA at home. You go on the road, lose an OT to Calgary, losing a shootout to Colorado. Come back home, beat the Islanders, lose to Detroit, and then beat Chicago. So just an interesting spell of how, as you said, like you tweak a couple of things, you can really get a team on track.
Yeah, you know what? And adding some fresh stuff. Now, I had a lot of the players in Oklahoma City too, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
So besides the Eberleys and Taylor Halls and that, also like guys like Anton Lander was up, Pieri was up, um, Arcabella was called up. So I had a lot of these players, so they're very familiar with me. So players talk to each other, so the players all knew what I was all about. So I didn't really have to sell a whole lot. I just had to be myself once again, and that's all I really did. And the team started playing with a higher tempo and winning a few games. So it's it was a benefit for me to have worked with some of the players that were already there.
for sure. I want to just jump ahead to another point in your career, and and part of this is just top of mind, as I mentioned, Craig Custance. Um, his new book touches on leadership in hockey, and each chapter is on a different person. And one of the people they cover is Jim Nill, who, for anybody that's met Jim Nill, he's one of the like all time gentlemen in the game and just an amazing human. But specifically, they talk about when you guys are in the bubble in Dallas and you make a run to the final and just the most like unique circumstances I think you could possibly imagine. I always like in sort of a hockey season, it's kind of like if you're a band playing a concert, like the key is to finish as high as you possibly can. Can you have that build up? And you're going to have ups and downs in a season, but you would appear to be somebody that's had a lot of experience on, getting a team to peak at the right time. That particular season in the bubble with Dallas, you guys just seemed to catch lightning in a bottle and you got on a roll. What do you remember from that time?
You know what? I thought Rick Bonus did a really good job of incorporating the families. If we're in the bubble, we can't get out, so
Yeah.
we played every other day there. It was really busy. Like I remember we beat Calgary in the first round in Game 6, and we're giving the guys the day off the next day, and all of a sudden we're going to get tested every day. And I got a phone call from Johnny Stevens, and he goes, "Nelly, I just passed by Jim Nill, and he mentioned that we're probably playing tomorrow night against Colorado." And I go, "Well, we got to find out because I'm in charge of the pre-scouts, and we meet. We always meet at night, 8 o'clock at night." So Bones called me, and Bones said, "Yeah." He goes, "We're meeting tonight at 8." So I spent the whole day in my hotel room pouring through video trying to get the team prepared for the pre-scout. And I just finished up my last clip around like 6 o'clock because then we compared video with the coaches and got the presentation together. But it was a really busy time there, and they wanted to get it done, get us out of there with no other COVID outbreaks, right? So so it was a different experience, But what Bones did was that in that meeting, after we're done with all the technical stuff with system work and that, he got videos from the wives, the girlfriends, the families, from me, mom and dad,
No
just
way.
doing yes, just doing a small thing like, hey, miss you, good luck in the playoffs and that, and then it caught fire where we had like Troy Aikman do it, Jordan Spieth, like celebrities
Come
around
on.
Dallas. Yeah, it was awesome, and so it kind of gave the guys, I wouldn't say hope, just it was easier on the guys to see their families and that, and see the support everybody in Dallas was giving us. And so I thought it was a great idea by Rick Bonus, and that kind of kept our sanity because it was tough. Like your routine was, game day, get them prepared, play the game. Now you do video review the next day, get ready for practice, meet at
Yeah.
8 o'clock at night, play the next day, and that's the way it was for 2 months.
And it
And
was like, I think, like reading the book, it was like there was like two restaurants. Like there
yeah,
was,
well,
it was just like I think we could all appreciate watching it on TV in the moment. You're like, this must be kind of weird. But then I read this book and I'm like, oh my god, like it must have been like Groundhog Day on steroids.
yeah, it was like I had relatives there that so like people could bring stuff like homemade food if you wanted and stuff. So my relatives would bring in I guess supplies and that, and
Yeah,
so I was kind of known as Red off of Shawshank Redemption.
that's hilarious.
I was the guy that could find things for people. So,
Yeah, no
but,
kidding.
but just to keep our sanity, and we when we beat Vegas, we had some time off because the Islanders were still playing Tampa, and
Yeah.
so they rented out a golf course for us just to go play golf. And
Oh, that must have been the best day ever.
it's amazing how you take things for granted from being in there because you have the hotel rooms, or you have the hotels, and you have the arena, and then outside you have the concrete jungle where they have the rink in the wintertime there, and that's the only places we're allowed to go. And so you take things for granted, like just simply on the bus ride to the golf course, just seeing grass because there was no like grass or anything we were staying, and just to go out and get the fresh air and play some golf, it was outstanding. But it's funny, yeah, it's funny how you take for granted some of those things. But it was a really unique experience for sure.
So you mentioned like just through this conversation, I mean, you play for Barry Trotz, you coach with Rick Bowness, Jim Montgomery. I mean, you've been around some of the best people in our sport. When you reflect back on your career, what might be some of the key things you've learned from some of these individuals that you incorporate in how you do things today?
Yeah, you know what? Like I said, I took a bit off of every coach that I've worked with or been coached. Like Barry Trotz taught me about the family atmosphere.
Yeah,
You know, um, Rick Bowness, he's the guy that played, or he wanted our team to play really stingy and focused on our net versus the opposing team's net.
yeah,
Monty was the same way, and I think that's why my coaching styles evolved here at Hershey to trying to have stingy hockey teams. Um, Johnny Anderson taught me about the creativity on the offensive side. He was an offensive player, so like you take a bit of everything. But just looking back, like I said, you're always evolving as a coach and trying to make yourself better. And like as coaches, we take something off another coach and use it to our advantage. And every coach does it. And I think that if you stop learning and just try to stay the same, you're going to get passed by. And so you want to make sure you stay current with the players and that. But other than that, like I said, I was just being myself and just trying to be a good coach for the players and helping them get better.
well, let's finish on that note. So you touched on this player earlier, Dylan McElrath. Is playing in Washington this year. And I think for anybody, he's a first round pick. I think he was 10th overall to the Rangers. Gets some time in the show, but ends up going back down to the minors. And he's 32 years old. And I mean, again, I mean, we talk about this as a human business. I would imagine there's probably been a lot of nights where Dylan McElrath thought, am I ever going to get that shot again, or should I go to Europe and ride it out over there? How rewarding is it to see a player like that get an opportunity like he has right now? You knowing that, just even watching videos from your run the last 2 years, like it was pretty clear, like how invested he was in seeing the team succeed versus, just himself maybe getting another shot.
Well, like anytime you get a guy called up where a player goes up, and in the case of Dylan, like what a great story. You
Yeah.
feel you feel really proud. You feel proud
Yeah.
uh, that she had some sort of say and helped them to get there. I think every player, that's the way we feel. But like Dylan, I think the way he played in the playoffs for the Caps last year, nobody expected the Caps to make the playoffs last year. I know they got swept, but he played really well up against New York. And you got to consider the Matt Rempe effect too. New York had Matt Rempe,
Yeah. Good call.
and I saw Dylan and Matt have some wars down here in the minors when we played against Hartford. And I think that had something to say about that, because a guy like Tom Wilson, like he's a guy that can score goals, and you don't want him off the ice in those situations. So I think having Matt Rempe, play in New York, helped Dylan probably at the start of this year too. And also Spencer Carberry knows Dylan McElrath. He
Yeah.
knows what he's able to bring to the table. So, I'm proud of Mac. We certainly do miss him here, but we couldn't be more happy to see him with the Washington Capitals.
That's awesome. Great story. Great story. Todd, listen, man, we really appreciate your time. And I think you've got a great story in yourself, having the three Calder Cups. And I think just you've been through some amazing experiences on your coaching journey, and I want to wish you best of luck to you and the Bears down the stretch here in Chocolate Town.
That's right. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed myself.